Hello, it's Tuesday, February 27, 2024, and we are doing some maintenance on the bus once again. Welcome to my home. Hakuna Matata, everyone. So this is the factory air conditioner that came with the bus that I kind of rebuilt during the build of my bus. And I just thought I'd take a moment and show you a couple things that I did. The evaporator sweats, and when the fan was blowing, it would splash water out. So I added this piece of plexiglass here that I bent to match this plastic pan, and I taped it into place there. Also on this side, not quite as pretty, is I made up this plexiglass piece here, and I have it caulked in to keep the water that drips off of these pipes within this area and not drip out here. And it works. I haven't had any drips. And lastly, we had a refrigerant leak here. The expansion valve is underneath all this. This is called cork tape. There's an adjustment nut, I forget if it's on the bottom or top, to adjust the expansion valve performance. And all I did was unscrew that and counted the turns, put new O-rings in there, and all new O-rings on all the connections as well. And we have not been leaking refrigerant. You know what? I probably should have done this guy too, but we've been good, so I'm not messing with anything like that. But today's project is we've got a mechanical problem with the fan. I'll turn it on for you so you could hear it. All right. It's hard to tell where it's coming from, the motor side or the idler side. But we're gonna fix this thing. So I've had this apart before. There's a Allen wrench that you use up through that hole to loosen the fan from the motor shaft. And then you drop the motor and the whole shebang will come out. So I'm gonna have to, let's see, disconnect the wires. It's a 7/16 up there for the ground wire. And this is gonna be that Phillips right there. So we'll disconnect the wires. We're gonna turn off our ignition switch. And yeah, let's get started. Okay, here's the fan. And it's only supported by two things. This ball bearing on the forward side or the right hand side. And this bearing is perfectly fine. And the other side of this fan is supported directly on the motor shaft. So now we're going to take a little walk out to the back and show you what we got going on there. I've got these wires connected to my 12-volt supply back here with my house battery stuff. I got my negative on the negative and the positive on the positive. We're going to run this motor for a moment, which I have to hold the motor down to do that. All right, so what we got here is some incredibly dry sounding bearings. All right, you know, I thought it was that. And before we went out to the swarm, I tried squirting some lube up in there, and that's what that black stuff is. And that did not work, so we're gonna try something else. Now that we've got the motor out, we'll have better access. I'm gonna do everything I can not to take this motor apart. But maybe that would be the right thing, put some grease on that. But let's think about this. Wow, this is needing more than just a little bit of lube. The commutator looks good. This end of the shaft looks good. The armature seems to be fine. This end of the shaft is evidently where the problem was. The brushes are excellent. So these are not ball bearings in here. These are just like bushings. And all these shavings came out of it. So I think, I don't know, there's nothing, those look like brass. I don't see any brass in here. I was gonna say maybe, whoopsie, don't roll off and fall down. I was thinking maybe this bearing here, these are spherical, I think. So that they're like a ball around the outside perimeter and they're held in place with the spring around the perimeter there. I was thinking that maybe this whole thing was spinning around in there. It's kind of hard to say. All right, let me get some, I've got some like, well, first brake clean and get the grime off of this thing. And then I'm gonna sand that down with some, I think I've got like 320 grit sandpaper to take the irregularities out. And this is actually the second motor. This is the motor that came off the rear air conditioner that I removed and kept for parts. This was making noise last time. I guess we could clean up the commutator a little bit too. After a wipe with brake clean, we're looking pretty good here. I can feel a slight bit of wear, just barely detectable. If I measured that, I'd say that'd be like a thousandths, maybe. Where are you? Sorry about that. And this side here looks good too. I'm still going to sand that down. A fine sanding with, I got some of that black wet or dry paper. I forget if that's carborundum or what. Now this side here, this is a felt pad right there that's there to provide lubrication for the bearing, which is that. It's a solid bearing. It's a hard metal bearing too. I guess it's oilite steel. I know, it doesn't look like bronze. But I'm using Blaster as my solvent to clean that, because I don't want to use brake clean in there and rinse out any lubrication that's already in there. What we're going to do is let this soak to loosen up all the crud, and we're going to blow this off with compressed air. I think we're going to have to use like axle grease on this. You know, oil would really be the proper lube, I think, but we got to double check and see how loose that bearing is. I got the armature chucked up in my drill, and I used some 600 grit sandpaper with a little bit of brake clean as a lubricant, and it polished that right up. And I still do feel a slight difference in diameter right there, but there's nothing we can do with that. And this side looks like brand new. I use 320 on the commutator, and when you do that, you got to make sure you clean all the particles out from between the segments so you don't have a short. This is the grease I've got. And actually, I just bought this up in Melrose when we were at the Swarm to grease the bearing in my Max Air fan that had ball bearings. All right, so the armature looks good. It's slightly worn on this side, and this side is pristine. Feel a little funny about using grease on an electric motor, but that's what we're going to use. All right, and that's because you kind of want to have oil so that the grease won't dry up. I got to put this brush in there so that the grease won't dry up. This is something I could show you. So you can hook the wire or the brush on something usually. This one's too short. I can't get it to hook, so I'm going to have to use two hands on this job to push the brush up in there and hold the brush back while I put the armature in place, and then insert it into the housing. We're looking good here. It feels nice and smooth. This is going to shut up all that groaning, but I don't know how long it's going to last. I have the other motor like this, and I'm actually going to, when we get back in our house later this year, I think I'm going to explore the possibility of converting this to a ball bearing. I can do that, but I don't have the tools to do it here. So now it's time to put the housing with the magnet, put the armature in there, and it's going to try to get sucked up in there from the strength of that magnet. So you've got to hold the shaft from launching and pulling it out of the brushes, and that's going to take two hands. This is the end of the motor that actually supports the fan, so I'm gooping up a little extra grease. There's a small cavity right there, like a groove. I filled that with grease, so it'll have a little bit of a reservoir of grease, if you will. And let's see if we can do this. Okay, so we've got some witness marks. I use my Sharpie pen. Right there, and this mark goes together with it. And there's also a key right here that this can only go in one way right there. Time for the bolts. Let's see how we did. How about that? Noisy sucker, ain't it? Sounds like something's rubbing in there. Well, I took this thing apart again and double checked everything, and there's nothing rubbing that's not supposed to be rubbing. That's just the sound of the commutator. The brush is rubbing on the commutator, and it sounds a little different when it rides in a different place on the commutator. And I've been letting this run for a few minutes just to like reseat the brushes a little bit. I'm vaguely recalling the motors are kind of noisy when they're run free like this, but when they're installed, not so much. All right, so I put a little dab of grease on the end. There's like a little bit of a well right there, and then also right there, so it's got a little extra supply of grease, which I don't know, I never used grease on an electric motor before, but all right, let's go put it in. Test run number 1. Fabulous.